This is how I know Billboard is actually rigging the charts, favoring certain artists or acts or labels. Nobody listens to radio anymore, and yet it still accounts for 90% of the statistics. The statistics when they count when they rank Billboard Hot 100 and 200. Okay, you actually might be wrong. There is a tweet going around claiming Billboard Hot 100's methodology of ranking songs is 95% radio, 3% streaming, and 2% sales. I can't find any reliable source that could support this claim. The only time Billboard talked about the exact formula they used to calculate ranking was back in 2013, and they said sales accounts for 35 to 45%, airplay is 30 to 40%, and then streaming is 20 to 30%. A post back in 2019 actually claimed that the formula is a secret. Now, in 2020, a controversy came out between the rapper 69 and Ariana Grande when they battled it out for the top spot of Billboard Hot 100, and it forced Billboard to explain their methodology. Well, they did, but only partially. They actually just gave an estimate, and they said, and I quote, the Hot 100 has a locked in methodology updated at least once a year, with each metric divided by a certain number, which results in an average chart ratio whereby streams are the most heavily weighted factor, followed next by radio airplay and then sales. Each song has its own ratio breakdown based on its specific activity, which contributes to the overall chart average each week. And then back early this year, Billboard actually released a new rule saying that they only one digital sale will be counted per customer per week for songs and albums. So if you buy two copies of the same song, they will only account for one. And then if they buy two albums, they will only count one. You can buy again the next week and they will count one more again. They did not provide any explanation. Many believe that this is due to BTS's reign in Billboard Hot 100. So one of the ways that many fans supported BTS was to buy multiple copies of the same song, and that helped them rank. Okay, so many believe that that was the reason Billboard made this change. Now, there's a lot of people who really didn't like this change because in a streaming service, an artist actually earns less. So they want more weight on sales because that would allow them to give more money to the artists that they're supporting. The other thing is that, of course, everyone knows of payola. Spins most of the time, not all, but most of the time, there has to be a good relationship between the label and the radio station for the radio to actually include that song in the rotation of the songs that they'll be playing. So in essence, it's just you are not for many fans, there is more importance or weight given to the relationship between the label and the radio station rather than what the listeners actually want to hear. Now, other fans say that it shouldn't matter whether or not Billboard is only counting one sale. If you want to support your artist, then just buy multiple copies, even if it is not going to count into Billboard. They think that the only reason anybody would be buying multiple copies of a song is to manipulate the charts. So they don't want that. So they say that no, this is the right move. But okay. So now, since all of that is out of the way, let me just explain radio. So it seems that more than 80% of people of Americans are still listening to radio. Okay, let me just get into the statistics of that. There are many different agencies, many different companies that can conduct a research on how many are listening to radio, how many are listening to streaming, and all of those things. But any statistician will tell you that one of the most important things for you to take into consideration is consistency of your data. So for example, if you want to compare 2018 listeners to 2019 listeners to 2020 listeners, the last thing that you should be doing is getting stats from Nielsen in this year, and then from, I don't know, John Smith research on another year, and then in Tabula Rasa research in another year, because they conduct their own research using different ways. They have, different ways of measuring and whatever. So you need to be consistent with how you generate your data when you're doing a comparison, or you're looking at the historic move of anything, basically. So for example, CBS actually conducted a research to see how many are listening to radio versus how many are listening to streaming platforms for their music consumption. And they found out that give me 1 second. Okay. So in 2017, only 32% of people listens to streaming services in 2017. Now, in 2022, there are 41% that are listening to streaming services. Compared to radio, back in 2017, only 36%, as much as 36% listens to radio for music consumption. Now it is only down to 31%. So, this is 2021. So it means that by February 2021, which was when CBS conducted the research, it seems that there are more people listening to streaming services for their music consumption rather than radio. There's only one problem. This research was conducted in 2021, so we don't know where 2017 data came from. They did not reveal it in the article that they wrote, in the article that they published. So they could have pulled that from anywhere. So I think any statistician will tell you, unless we know the credibility of that data and how it was generated and computed, we shouldn't be using that. Given that they may be right, but because we don't know, we can't prove the credibility of the data, we'll put that aside. Okay, there are other agencies that are more consistently used computing this, how many people are listening to streaming and radio, the growth or decline of radio and stuff like that. Like Nielsen, Edison Research, those are some of the credible research agencies that have established its credibility because the results of their research have been proven. Regardless of that, at least they are consistent. The other thing is that we do need to understand there are different types of radio stations and radio shows. There's terrestrial radio, satellite radio, syndication. So terrestrial radio is local programming. So for example, in the US, as such a big country, it's not just per state, but it's also per area. So for example, in California, we're divided into SoCal and NorCal. So Southern California and then Northern California. Some programming in Southern California will not hear in Northern California. Not only that, there are certain programming local to LA, just LA. So you go to LA County, you'll hear them, but if you go to San Bernardino County, you'll not hear them anymore. So there are so many terrestrial radio. So it's either AM and FM. Satellite radio is the whole region. So it's broadcasted to the entire country. So if this guy is big enough, for example, if this radio is more popular, radio show is popular enough, then they can broadcast it to the whole region. And then the other thing is that do know that there are a lot of radio shows and radio stations that are actually also being broadcasted in different podcast stations and streaming stations. So they don't take that into consideration. The other thing that you keep in mind is the accessibility of streaming versus radio. Radio has a prime spot in a car. And the only thing that you need to do is push a button and you're already listening to a radio station. Set it up once if that is your favorite radio station, and you will always listen to it anytime that you want, just pushing a button. If versus a streaming platform, it has to be intentional. You get your phone, turn your phone on, make sure you have internet connection, open the app, choose the program or the music that you want to listen to, and then you will be listening. So there are several steps involved, basic versus one step for a radio in a car or just a radio player. Push the button on, you're good to go, right? So that accessibility pays off according to Edison Research, because a whopping 83% of Americans that are 13 years old and above listen to terrestrial radio almost every day. Now, streaming isn't so far behind. According to Edison research, 85% of Americans have a cell phone, and 77%, I think, they have either a laptop or a computer or a tablet. And of course, if you have any of that, then you know that you have access to a streaming service. But as I've said, it's more intentional. So there's 68% of the total US population of 12 years old and above that would listen to music through their streaming platform once a month. So uh, so the other one is 83% listening to terrestrial radio at least once a week, and then the 68% listening to streaming platform at least once a month. That's a huge difference. However, the good news is that majority of Gen Z, 83%, in fact, would prefer to digital platform rather than actual radio when it comes to consumption of their music. I know it's so sort of foreign for a lot of young people to conceive how somebody so young would listen to radio and not just listen to a podcast or listening to their Apple Music for music consumption. Why turn the radio on? But that's what it is, right? That's how it is. Remember that the US is such a huge country. There are a lot of places here you don't see and you don't experience. You don't see the way of life there, so you see the glamorous and the fast-paced life of New York and sometimes Chicago and California. But there's a huge part of country you don't see. Have a different kind of life in there. So this is not so remote. This is not so unbelievable. Also, they have another research, or part of that same research actually revealed that 15% of radio listening actually happens in a streaming service. So that's when I said earlier that a lot of radio shows actually also get streamed into podcasts. That's what I'm talking about. So 15% of those listening to radio would actually consume it in a streaming service. So that's still a huge part. Now, if we switch to Nielsen Research, another credible and established research agency, according to them, in 2020, 83% of Americans ages 12 and above are actually listening to terrestrial radio. Now, that's a drop, actually, because in 2019, according to their research, 89% of Americans ages 12 and above listens to terrestrial radio. By 2020, it's down to 83%. So it seems that there is some consistency in the findings of Nielsen and Edison research. So, and it all reveals the same thing. Although streaming is becoming popular by leaps and bounds, radio remains the most popular. And unfortunately, as I've said in the beginning, the whole conundrum that we're in is that this only transfers the rigging or the control from the music executives to the fans to the music executives. So music executives, as I've said and as I've explained in the beginning of this video, they need to establish a good relationship with the radio station so that the music that they send that they send to the radio station becomes a part of their regular program, and that is manipulation, right? That's it's your relationship versus what actually the market wants to hear, as opposed to fans that are actually given the power to choose which song or which artist goes into the charts. Now, I'm really, because I have been here a while, I've seen how people work, how all of these charts work. I do respect them. I think they still are a good indication of success. I also believe that is not the be-all and end-all of one's measure of success. The impact is still more important to me. You could win all the awards in the world, but if your music doesn't do anything to me or to other people, then it doesn't, it doesn't weight anything for me. I still think that music to a certain level, it has to have an independent. It shouldn't have like a social mission, but it does have to say something. It it does have to mean something. It needs to reflect something, and generally it should be good. That music can be capitalizing on, can be telling an evil story, but if the point of it all is to make us reflect on the evilness of the world, then that's okay. For as long as it serves a purpose, and generally a good purpose, even if it is artistically delivered. I don't know if I'm making sense. So yeah, but I hope that answers your question. I know it seems so hard to believe for a lot of young people to conceive or accept that a lot of young people are still listening to radio, but that's what it is across all measures. It seems that there's still a significant chunk of the US population that's still listening to radio. Hope that helps.